Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Welcome back to our 56th live stream, it seems. I actually might want to check that. I miscounted at one point, and then I re-edited all those previous live streams. I think we are actually on 56, but we can simply check quickly to make sure. Nope, it's wrong. This is actually the 53rd live stream. Yeah, 49, 50, 51. And then, yeah, that was where my editing stopped, was at the last time. So today is actually 51, 52, 53. Today is the 53rd live stream. Okay, I just saved it in my notes, so we should be good from here on out. Just have to edit the last two ones. All right, and today we are doing chapter 7, verse 12 through 15, the next cluster of verses, with verse 15 having a very long purport. And I haven't prepared for this at all, so this will probably be a long live stream, maybe 1 hour. I'll try not to go over an hour. Let's do it. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Such a big deluxe edition, it's hard to hold. The definitive edition, definitive English edition. Okay, verse 12. I am the strength of the strong, devoid of passion. Oh, wait, no. We did that last time. That was verse 11. Sorry. Here is verse 12. All states of being, be they of goodness, passion, or ignorance, are manifested by my energy. I am in one sense everything, but I am independent. I am not under the modes of this material nature. I'm guessing just by how this is worded that the Sanskrit word for word is, yeah, it's much more dense than the English translation. And yeah, so there's probably a bunch of gaps there, but I can also tell that the English translation makes it very clear what Krishna is saying. And there are a few key words here, one of them being under, which you may notice I did an analog marking of. It's an NLP term. I'm going to close that window. Maybe you didn't hear that car go by, but anyway. Let's just read the word for word translation. All those, and certainly in goodness, the states of being, mode of passion, mode of ignorance. Also, although from me, certainly thus those, try to know, not, but I. In those, they unto me. Unto me. Yeah, that's where you get under the modes is Mayi, unto me. It's very difficult to understand the Sanskrit. So thank you, Prabhupada, for translating this so clearly and in an indisputable sense, I would say. Yeah, once again, the key thing is that it's not so much that Krishna is saying, I am everything. It's more that he's saying, I am independent from the three modes. Because it's kind of, by this point, it should be obvious that, Krishna is God, Krishna is everything. But the key of this verse is that there are three primary states of being, and the word bhava is used, which Prabhupada translates as states of being in the word for word translation and the English translation, bhava, states of being, which is a common word used in ISKCON. Most people also, or more commonly, use that word to mean mood. What's your mood? But bhava here literally means state of being. And it's probably the same word we talking before, bhutam, like a created being, jiva bhutam, bh. But maybe not. I'm really speculating on that one. Yeah, so Krishna literally says, Vidhi, try to know, try to understand that teshu, in those material modes, I am not. Unto me, I am not, they are not. And from me, mataha, certainly, these three modes certainly come from me, but also really try to know. So certainly is important there. He's saying, once again, that's why the English translation is so great, because when Prabhupada says, I am in one sense everything, that's kind of translated from certainly. Krishna says, oh, losing breath here. I'm gonna loosen up my belt a little bit. Maybe that'll help. Yeah, certainly they come from me. Like that, he wants Arjuna to be really clear about that. And us too. Arjuna, remember, is a symbol for the reader of and the listener of the Bhagavad Gita, us. Krishna is saying, Arjuna, like these three modes are certainly from my energy. They're certainly from me. In the same way that all the previous verse cluster, that was like, I am the heat and fire, the strength of the strong, and so on. That's Krishna's energy. Same here. The three modes are certainly Krishna's energy, certainly. And certainly sattva, as the first one, is even more about Krishna than the other two. And that's one you'll only get from the word-for-word translation. In the English translation, Prabhupada translates it more academically, more philosophically, as just the three modes all being equal, which we should understand as spiritualists. We should understand that to be true. But Go Brahmana Hitayacha, and I forget the other line that I say all the time in it. The demigods are in Sattva Guna, and Krishna is the protector of the demigods. So Krishna has a particular affinity for Sattva Guna that really is more like his bhav than the other two modes, and he's really stressing many different sattvic things to Arjuna, in the same way that Prabhupada, was adamant about vegetarianism, but he said, look, at the very least, just, don't eat beef, don't eat pig, like don't eat the big meats. At the very least, just try to moderate your meat intake as much as possible. That's like a sattvic bhav there. And Krishna tells Arjuna much the same all throughout the Gita, like, look, if you can't do this like really hard yoga practice, well, at least, do some, something else sattvic in my name. He's saying at least be sattvic. That's one of the main themes of the Gita. All right, that's too much from me. We have to. Oh, small purport. Maybe we'll just read it. All material activities in the world are being conducted under the three modes. Yeah, yes, Krishna's not subject to them. And here's a great analogy here, or simile from Prabhupada. Under the state laws, one may be punished, but the king, the lawmaker, is not subject to that law. And similarly, all the modes are emanations from Lord Krishna, but Krishna is not subject to them. Therefore, he is nirguna. He is not affected by the modes. That is one of the special characteristics of Bhagavan, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Quick note once again about book editing, a common theme here, because Prabhupada clearly states here and in other places that Bhagavan, the same word we see in the Gita, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, Prabhupada clearly states this means the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, when Prabhupada says the Blessed Lord, as a translation of Sri Bhagavan, the same word, he's not saying it's two different things, guys. Come on. It's just poetic rhetoric. It's just poetics. And I'm using that in the Aristotelian sense. It's just beauty. It's just a way to make the words beautiful, sound nice. But technically speaking, Bhagavan means the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those three words all must be there simultaneously, just like bhakti means loving, devotional service. You need all three words simultaneously in that technical definition. That's your fundamental wisdom, your fundamental knowledge. And from those fundamentals, then you can start getting to advanced things like, this bhakti, that bhakti, whatever. Verse 13. Deluded by the three modes, the whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. And that word inexhaustible is avyayam. So vyayam, I guess, would mean exhaustible, and avyayam means inexhaustible. And yes, Prabhupada says, he restates the simple truth from Krishna in the first line of the purport. The whole world is enchanted by three modes of material nature, including Sattvaguna. When you dig deep into Sattvaguna and you reap the extraordinary benefits as compared to Rajaguna and Tamaguna, you start thinking you are God, and or maybe if you believe in God, well, I don't need God because I'm all set, bro. And so that's a form of enchantment that means you really don't know Krishna. And I think also inexhaustible, I think Krishna is hinting that these three modes are exhaustible. They will run out. Eventually, for your eternal being, your eternal consciousness, eventually you'll want something more than these three modes. They will never, from the eternal standpoint, be good enough. Prabhupada talks about how we have, by nature, different types of body and psychic, biological activities accordingly. And there are four classes of men functioning in the three modes. The Brahmins, Kshatriyas, okay, those are the Varnas. And then there are those who are less than Sudras, that are animals or in animal life. However, these designations are not permanent. This life is temporary. And then Prabhupada makes the connection between, just as we have a temporary Varna designation, we also, by the spell of this illusory energy, we consider ourselves American, Indian, Russian, whatever. And if we become entangled with the modes, we forget Sri Bhagavan, who is behind all these modes. And it's also important to note, as Prabhupada does here, that they're not just human beings. There's also demigods, animals, etc. Each and every one of them is under the influence of material nature. And all of them have forgotten the transcendent personality of Godhead. This is a classic example of what I would call sattvic rhetoric. Just as Sri Chaitanya says, there Eva Kevalam, there is no other way, there is no other way. Well, he's not actually saying that every other devotee of the Lord who is not chanting the holy names, who is like maybe praying or doing one of the other 9, processes of devotional service, is not a real devotee and they're heretics, get rid of them. Oh! It's not to be taken super literally. Likewise, although technically what Prabhupada says is how you could, when you just read it literally, when he says all of them have forgotten the personality of Godhead, well, that's not true for him. He's a human being or demigod or devotee, something like that. Has he forgotten the transcendent personality of Godhead? It doesn't seem like it. And he has some disciples who have not forgotten as well. So there are exceptions. But all in this case means like 99.98%. If you really, do the math on all the different species, the insects, the plants on other planets as well, yeah, it's basically true. It's far more true than not that all of the living entities in the material world have forgotten the transcendent Bhagavan. And then, importantly, Prabhupada says, those in passion and ignorance, and even those in goodness, cannot go beyond the impersonal Brahman conception of the absolute truth. They are still bewildered. Krishna consciousness is transcendental to all these 3 modes of material nature, and those who are truly established in Krishna consciousness are actually liberated. Verse 14. This divine energy of mine, consisting of the 3 modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Okay, so this is actually maybe verse 15 is kind of maybe the new part of a cluster, but anyway, it would make sense that it's exactly 3 verses at a time that Krishna, how he speaks, because it's just good numerology. Each verse is 4 lines, and then times 3 verses, that's 12 lines. 1 plus 2 is 3. 12 is divisible by 3 and by 4. It's just very clean that way. So in the past 2 verses, Krishna talks about how, and he summarizes here in the first half of this verse that these 3 modes have got all of us by hook and chain, right? So what do we do? How do we go beyond it? Well, quite simply, surrender unto Krishna, and then you can easily cross beyond it. If you don't want the easy way, if you want the hard way, well, that was chapter 6. Ashtanga yoga, dhyana yoga, that's the hard way, which does work at overcoming the modes, at least at overcoming rajas and tamas. Yes, you can do many different austerities to go beyond, but to easily cross beyond, not just taste what is beyond, but to cross all the way beyond, this must be done only by surrendering to Krishna. I'm getting a sign here that my laptop fan is going really strong. Now it's starting to cool down because I unplugged. But as soon as I talked about the rhetoric thing, that fan turned on, which is a sign to me that, oh, buddy, watch what you're saying. You might be starting to be offensive or on the border of offensive. I think that's true. I don't intend to, but I did say on the outside this is more for advanced listeners, and I'm not marketing this on purpose. I don't mind at all if no one watches this, including myself a second time. Yeah. Sometimes nitpicking is offensive, even if it's technically true that, for instance, 99.9% of people have forgotten, and that's different from 100%, which is the literal meaning of all. I'm not saying Prabhupada is a liar. I wouldn't write it any differently than how he did. But I'm showing the literal translation to show you guys and myself when we don't use the literal translation. So having the ability to understand something literally very articulately, very well, gives you the tool so that just keep it in your toolbox, and then you use your wisdom to know, okay, when do I actually need to use that translation style, and when should I not do that? And I think I was right, as in that last example, that you should still, even though it's like 0.001% off, it's still best to take this as true. Jesus Christ is different from Lord Chaitanya, and Christ said the same thing. No one shall come to the Father but through me. I think there are examples of that, of exceptions to that, but it's basically true. It doesn't mean he's not speaking the truth just because you can find one or two or a few very rare exceptions. And even those exceptions can go under question. We better move on. About a full page or more purport here for verse 14. The living entities belong to the eternal superior nature of the Lord, but due to contamination, their illusion is also eternal. The conditioned soul is therefore called nitya baddha, or eternally conditioned. Oh boy. Whew. No one can trace out the history of his being conditioned at a certain date in material history. Consequently, his release from the clutches of material nature is very difficult, even though that material nature is an inferior energy, because material energy is ultimately conducted by the supreme will, which the living entity cannot overcome. And this once again goes back to the classic analogy of God being a father. He's not a helicopter parent. A good parent is not a helicopter parent. They don't, just like decide everything for you. They let you make your own decisions, and they let you suffer the consequences of your own decisions. So it's very important for Krishna to have this law of karma being very well active for the living entities. And that means, so Krishna can not have a hands-on activity the whole time. So and that's why Krishna set it up this way, so the inferior nature can control, in a sense, the superior nature, because Krishna himself, being the super most superior nature, it's just a natural way that we can be worthy of that, is by truly overcoming the inferior nature. Truly overcoming means not just, I'm just born this way, I'm just born superior, and Maya is born inferior, so see you later, I don't need to worry about you at all. It's like, no, there's a good reason that it's illusory, and that illusion works on us, and we really become attached to illusion, and the more we work at genuinely overcoming that, the more worthy we are of being in our actual constitutional position as superior energy of the Lord versus the inferior energy of the Lord. And then if we can maintain that for long enough, eventually we'll say, well, there must be something superior to me. And then we have a chance at cleanly, healthily, sustainably, and cleanly coming back home, back to Godhead. Being conducted by divine will, material nature, although inferior, acts so wonderfully in the construction and destruction of the cosmic manifestation, as the Vedas confirm. Quote, although Maya is false or temporary, the background of Maya is the supreme magician, the personality of Godhead, who is Maheshvar, the supreme controller. Unquote. Another meaning of guna is rope. I didn't know that. That's basically news to me. I always understood guna as meaning quality or mode, right? But I also already know that Sanskrit, much like Chinese and the other Asian languages, almost every word has some physical, three-dimensional meaning for it. So yoga doesn't just mean union, it also means the yoke, the physical thing that you use to unite two oxen. So guna means rope. And the conditioned soul is tightly tied by the ropes of illusion. A man bound by the hands and feet cannot free himself. He must be helped by a person who is unbound. Because the bound cannot help the bound, the rescuer must be liberated. Therefore, only Lord Krishna or his bona fide representative, the spiritual master, can release the conditioned soul. Without such superior help, one cannot be freed from the bondage of material nature. And here, Prabhupada uses the word causeless mercy. Krishna orders this release of the insurmountable illusory energy. Krishna orders this release out of his causeless mercy on the surrendered soul and out of his paternal affection for the living entity who was originally a beloved son of the Lord. So there's the paternal analogy there being used. So, imagine your father, sends you off to school or to prison or to train boot camp or whatever. And, the son comes back and he says, Dad, I really tried my best, but they beat me, they hurt me. And, they said I did a good job even, but they wouldn't graduate me. And, if he sees that you're sincere, he'll probably go to the leader of the boot camp and start fighting on your behalf. And then maybe they'll say, okay, yes, we'll let him graduate. And so it's kind of like this. As long as you're sincere and surrendered, sincere and humble, and the timing is right, by his causeless mercy, he will simply release you. He will unbind you, either by himself or through his bona fide representative. Prabhupada also notes here that Mam Eva in this verse means unto Krishna or Vishnu only, and not Brahma or Shiva. And this is because even though Shiva and Brahma are very high-level souls, almost on the level of Vishnu, it is not possible for such incarnations of Rajaguna, Tamaguna to release the conditioned soul from the clutches of Maya. In other words, both Brahma and Shiva are also under the influence of Maya. Only Vishnu is the master of Maya. Therefore, he alone can release the conditioned soul. And there's a phrase in the Vedas, Tvam eva viditva, or freedom is possible only by understanding Krishna. Whoa, I'm going to write that one down. That would be 7:14 purport end. I want to do a word-for-word translation of that later. I'm guessing Tvam here means freedom, but, probably means a bunch of other things too. Ava, we've seen many times before, means only or certainly. That much is clear. And Vidi, or is like Veda or Vidya. And so Tvam and Tva at the end, that's, the play on words there. Yeah, that's I'm glad I wrote that down. That needs time. That needs a lot of time and study to understand nicely. On to verse 15. All right, we're at 30 minutes, so probably will take less than 30 minutes for this one verse, but I'll tell you right now, chapter 7, verse 15 has 1, 2, 3 full pages of purport, and then another page and another, like basically 4 full pages of purport for this verse. So, which is probably the single longest purport we've seen. Definitely in this hexad so far, because we're on the second hexad of the Gita. So far, this is maybe the most significant verse. But even within the first hexad, I mean, maybe it was, one of the very early chapter 1, chapter 2 verses that has a long purport, because the reader just doesn't have any background info. But very long purport here. Okay, here's the verse. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. So I'm laughing because it's actually such a simple verse. It's such a simple and explicit verse that, like, for me reading this, I don't need any purport. It's like, okay, got it, moving on. And I don't mean that in a bad way or a good way. It's just like, it's just obvious. And, I have a lot of experience with this, and I'm very good at avoiding those people. Prabhupada is much more compassionate than me. And he was surrounded at the time of writing this, perhaps, by atheistic, demonic energies and people, including his disciples, who just maybe they have enough interest where they'll try it, but they don't really have what it takes to surrender, because illusion, atheism, and demonic ethos is there. All right. Let's start going on the purport here. Or maybe first we'll just look at the Sanskrit. I'll just read the word-for-word translation. Not unto me, miscreants, foolish, surrender. Lowest among mankind, by the illusory energy, stolen by illusion, knowledge, demonic nature, accepting. And then here's my translation of that. The foolish miscreants and lowest among mankind do not surrender unto me. They are stolen by illusion. They have demonic knowledge, and they accept a demonic nature. Bhava, bhavam. That word is used again. Asuram bhavam. That's very strong. So Krishna just talked about guna, the three gunas as bhava, and in a very kind of impersonal way, like, oh, there's these three modes. Some of you are in this mode, some of you are in that mode, and now he says asuram bhavam, purely demonic, basically. Okay, it's not really what my translation is not really different from Prabhupada's translation. The only difference is Prabhupada says who partake of the atheistic nature of demons. So he adds the word atheist, which is great. I wish I did that. It's not technically in Krishna's words, but it should be there because demonic and atheistic are synonymous. Those are not actually really two different things. They may be occurring at two different times within a person's character or timeline or lifeline or whatever timeline, but they're the same thing. Kind of like shooting and slam dunking in basketball are the same thing. One you do far away from the basket, one you do close to the basket, but it's the same thing. It's a scoring move to make points for your team. And likewise, being atheistic and being demonic are moves, are offensive moves against God. So, for example, being demonic might be, killing someone, killing an innocent person just for fun or just to gain profit. That's strictly speaking in English, demonic. Whereas being atheistic could be writing a book about how God is impersonal or God is not real. That doesn't physically harm anyone. So we may not call it demonic, but it's certainly atheistic. And when people read that book and accept it, they become atheistic, which promotes demonism, which goes against God, and that's why they're the same thing. Different sub-bhav, different component bhav, but same general bhav. Oh. At this point, a question arises. How is it that educated philosophers, scientists, businessmen, administrators, and all the leaders of ordinary men do not surrender to the lotus feet of Sri Krishna? Liberation is sought by the leaders in different ways, and they make great plans to do it. But if that liberation is possible by simply surrendering unto the lotus feet of God, why don't these intelligent Harvikan leaders adopt this simple method? The Gita answers this question very frankly. Okay, I like this. Those really learned leaders of society like Brahma, Shiva, Kapila, and more, or faithful philosophers, poets, educators, and so on, they surrender to the lotus feet of the Supreme Person, the all-powerful authority. Actually, there's other good examples here, like Prahlad, Bali, the Kumaras, Manu, Vyasa, Devala, Asita, Janaka. Okay. Oh, Madhvacharya, Ramunajacharya, Sri Chaitanya. Okay, so I said all the names. Now, what's the common thread with all of them? They're all Vaishnavas, and that's what Prabhupada's going to say for the next part here. Those who are not actually philosophers, scientists, educators, administrators, and so on, but who pose themselves as such for material gain, do not accept the plan or path of the Supreme Lord. They have no idea of God. They simply manufacture their own worldly plans and consequently complicate the problems of material existence in their vain attempts to solve them. And because Maya is so powerful, it can resist the unauthorized plans of the atheists and baffle the knowledge of planning commissions. Prabhupada uses quotes for planning commissions. He could be he could be referring to his own GBC there. And the atheistic plan makers are described by the word dushkirtina, or miscreants. Kirtina means one who has performed meritorious work. So miscreant or dushkirtina is probably one who has not performed meritorious work. So the atheist plan maker is sometimes very intelligent and meritorious also, because any gigantic plan, good or bad, must take intelligence to execute. But because the atheist brain is improperly utilized in opposing the plan of the Supreme Lord, excuse me, the atheistic plan maker is called dushkirtina, which indicates his intelligence efforts are misdirected. Material energy works as the shadow moves in accordance with the movements of the object, in this case, the Supreme Lord. That's very important and special about the Gita compared to like Buddhist literature, for instance. This Maya, this enemy of mukti and enlightenment and so on, this great material illusory enemy of ours is actually divine. It is, but is the divine shadow. So it is a shadow. It's illusory, it's temporary, but it's a shadow that's a shadow from God. So if you follow the shadow, you go back to the object. You can literally find God through Maya. In fact, there may not be any other way. I guess the only other way is what we mentioned, Prabhupada mentioned in the last purport, which is a surrendered soul who is bound, and then by Krishna's causeless mercy, that soul is unbound by Krishna himself or by a spiritual master. But what I'm saying here is that I'm not talking about full-on enlightenment and being saved and all that. I just mean because the material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. If you're a scientist or philosopher who carefully studies the material world, you can start to get a picture of what the spiritual world is, especially if you've read this verse and you understand that it's a shadow. You can start to imagine how that shadow is coming from an object which is pure and untainted. But your imagining will still not save you. You still need to be unbound by someone else, not just your intelligence. And that's exactly why these atheist plan makers don't win in the end, and they cause trouble, because that's part of the demonic energy and knowledge, is that I am a controller. I can do it by myself with my intelligence, and that is not true. Ultimately, it's not true. It may be true for Maya, it may be true for getting a good job and all sorts of getting a good wife and a good mundane things. Sure, you can use your intelligence to do lots of great things. Sure, but eternally, that has no place. And Prabhupada mentions Hiranyakashipu and Ravana, whose plans were smashed to dust, although they were both very learned philosophers, administrators, and so on. These are miscreants. And there are 4 different patterns, as outlined below. Number 1, the mudhas, those who are grossly foolish, like hardworking beasts of burden. They want to enjoy the fruits of their labor by themselves and do not want to part with them for the supreme. Typical example is the ass. This humble beast is made to work very hard by his master. He only remains satisfied by filling his stomach with grass, sleeping for a while, living under fear of being beaten. This is so funny. And satisfying the sex appetite at the risk of being repeatedly kicked by the opposite party. Oh, many images come to mind there. The ass sings poetry and philosophy sometimes, but this braying only disturbs others. He does not know that karma is meant for jagya. Action is meant for sacrifice. And most often, these who work very hard say they have no time to hear of the immortality of the living being. To such mudhas, material gains, which are destructible, are life's all in all, despite the fact that they enjoy a very small fraction of that. They don't actually enjoy that much. They are simply absorbed night and day, yes, 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 and they're ignorant of their real master. The swine who eat the soil do not care to accept sweetmeats made of sugar and ghee. Similarly, the foolish worker will untiringly continue to hear of the sense-enjoyable tidings of the flickering mundane force that moves the material world. Another class of dushkirtina, or miscreant, is called the Naradham. Naradham, or the lowest of mankind. Nara means human. Adham means the lowest. So it literally means the lowest human. There are 400,000 human species. Out of these, there are numerous lower forms that are mostly uncivilized. Those who are socially and politically developed, but who have no religious principles, must be considered Naradhams. Unfortunately, guys, I got to tell you, that's true not just for America, but also South Korea as well. And that's the main difference with China versus Korea. Even though the Chinese religion, the primary religion still being practiced all throughout China, Confucianism is, does not have anything to do with God. It is religious. It does promote familial piety and a dharmic culture, which is still alive and active. At least the last time I was there. We'll see. Maybe I'll go back and I'll see things are different and I'll have to leave. But yeah, they don't have it here, man, in Korea. They know how to work hard, but they don't know why they're working hard, and therefore they suffer. Nor is religion without God religion, because the purpose of following religious principles is to know the supreme truth in man's relation with him. Yes, yes, Krishna, yes, Prabhupada. I know I'm in Maya, being obsessed with the Chinese who are pious but not actually religious. But Prabhupada, I believe you. I believe you when you say that the Chinese will be the last to become Krishna conscious devotees and they will be the best. I believe you. And I hope I can be a part of that, because guess what? I do actually love them. And I don't actually love most other nations, most other people. I simply do not. I love my students because they are innocent children of any race or nation. Fine. So I can always do that. But adults who have earned my love, many devotees have not gotten love from me. Real love. No, definitely not. Wow, that was the first time in 53 streams that my screen went black from inactivity for a split second. That was interesting. at a very crucial time as well. Significant time, we shall say. Moving on. Whoever loses this chance to meet God is Naradam. And Prabhupada says, when the baby is in the mother's womb, he prays to God for deliverance and promises to worship him alone as soon as he gets out. Wow. To pray to God when he is in difficulty is a natural instinct in every living being because he is eternally related with God. But after his deliverance, the child forgets the difficulties of birth and forgets his deliverer also, being influenced by Maya. It is the duty of the guardians of children to revive the divine consciousness dormant in them. Jai Vidyananda Das. I have done exactly that in my kindergarten classes. Straight up. The teacher, tell us Krishna's story, please. Teacher, tell us Jesus' story, please. I win. Maybe I don't have my own children. At the moment, I don't need to because I win. I am the champion spoken of here, where most people are not They simply are not. Ho, 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 ho. The 10 processes of reformatory ceremonies, as enjoined in the Manusmriti, are meant for reviving God consciousness in the system of Varnashram. However, no process is strictly followed now in any part of the world, and therefore 99.9% of the population is Naradam. And of course, our education becomes null and void. And remember, a true Brahman, as the Gita said before, is one who has Samadarshina, who sees all the dog, the cow, the dog eater, the Brahman, all the same. And so one example of this is Sri Nityananda Prabhu, who delivered the Naradams, Jagai and Madai, and showed how the mercy of a real devotee is bestowed upon the lowest of mankind. So even the Naradham, who is condemned by Godhead, by Sri Bhagavan, can again revive spiritual consciousness only by the mercy of a devotee. Sri Chaitanya has, in propagating Bhagavad Dharma, has recommended people submissively hear the message of Sri Bhagavan. The essence of this message is Bhagavad Gita. And Naradhams can be delivered by this submissive hearing process only. But unfortunately, they even denied giving an oral reception to these messages, and what to speak of surrendering to the will of the Supreme Lord. Naradhams, or the lowest of mankind, will fully neglect the prime duty of the human being. Jai Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Number 3, the next class of Dushkirtina is called Maya Parthagyana. So many syllables. Maya Parthagyana. Those persons whose erudite knowledge has been nullified by the influence of illusory material energy. So yeah, they're jnanis who have way too much Maya. It's my own translation there. They are mostly very learned fellows, great philosophers, and so on, but Maya misguides them, and therefore they disobey the Supreme Lord. There are a great number at the present moment, even amongst the scholars of the Gita. In the Gita, in plain and simple language, it is stated that Sri Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is none equal to or greater than him. He is the root of everything. Yes, yes, yes. And despite all these clear statements, the Maya Parthagyana deride the personality of the Supreme Lord and consider him merely another human being. They do not know that the blessed form of human life is designed after the eternal and transcendental feature of the Supreme Lord. And so these people too, the deluded interpreters, do not surrender unto the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, nor do they teach others to follow this principle. Number 4, the last class of Dushkirtina is called Asuram Bhavam Ashrita, or those of demonic principles, those of the demonic bhav. This class is openly atheistic. Some of them argue the Supreme Lord can never descend upon this material world, but they are unable to give any tangible reasons as to why not. How could they? There are others who make him subordinate to the impersonal feature, although the opposite is declared in the Gita. They are envious, and the atheist will present a number of illicit incarnations manufactured in the factory of his brain. Such persons I love how Prabhupada uses the word brain there, because, for him, for Prabhupada, and for us, we have better words than brain. We talk about intelligence, mind, ahankara, and so on. But brain, that's the word that, materialist, atheist, scientists use. They think everything is just in the brain, which is stupid. Such persons whose very principle of life is to decry the personality of Godhead cannot surrender into the lotus feet of Sri Krishna. Oh, did we actually? That was a really fast, 4 pages. One little more part here. Sri Yamunacharya Albandru of South India said, quote, "O my Lord, you are unknowable to persons involved with atheistic principles, despite your uncommon qualities, features, and activities, and despite your personality being confirmed by all the revealed scriptures in the quality of goodness, and despite your being acknowledged by the famous authorities, renowned for their depth of knowledge in the transcendental science, and situated in the godly qualities," unquote. Therefore, number 1, grossly foolish persons. Number 2, the lowest of mankind. Number 3, the deluded spectators. And number 4, the professed atheists. I would add the professed atheist demons, as above mentioned, never surrender unto the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead in spite of all scriptural and authoritative advice. How are we doing on time? 56 minutes. Perfect. That's it, folks. See you again next time. Hare Krishna, Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Prabhupada, and all glories to all the devotees.